Hola a todos, espero que ustedes se encuentren bien. Today we are going to review the CSEC Spanish May June 2022 paper 2. All right, so let us get right into it. Section 1, directed situations. Okay, so A, you're going to visit your aunt who lives abroad. Write the text message you send expressing how you feel about your visit and why. So two details. You have to say how you feel and why. So I use sentirse. I said me siento feliz porque quiero verte. I feel happy because I want to see you. So I could also use estar because estar is used for emotions. I could say estoy feliz porque quiero verte. So as long as you have those two details and you express them correctly, you will be awarded full credit. All right. B, you want to participate in a concert, but you cannot decide which instrument you should play. Write the text message your friend sends you suggesting which one you should choose and why. Again, you have two pieces of information. You have to suggest which instrument the friend should play and why. So you're writing from his perspective or her perspective, right? So to give suggestions, we can use debe. We can use the conditional form of deber followed by the infinitive. So deberías tocar el piano porque la música será bonita. You should play the piano because the music will be beautiful. Of course, there are other ways to give suggestions. You could even use poder. You could say, puedes tocar el piano. Um, simple structures like that. I would recommend that you do not use the subjunctive because that is more complex, but you can give suggestions without having to resort to the subjunctive. So using poder, you can say deber and the infinitive, but that is more of an obligation. But you want a tone that indicates suggestion. So that would be the best option. The conditional form of deber, which is should, right? Mhm. Or you can use poder, like you can. C, you receive a Valentine's Day card from a secret admirer with two pieces of information for you to guess who he or she is. Write the two pieces of information. So this person wrote two details for you to figure out who he or she is. So I just any two details. So tengo una hermana que se llama Dora y mi pelo es rubio. So obviously if you have a secret admirer, um, it's possible that you could notice they could know each other, right? It's possible, um, it may not necessarily be the case. So the two details I wrote, tengo una hermana que se llama Dora y mi pelo es rubio. So I have a sister whose name is Dora and my hair is blonde. Mhm. So any two details that would help the person guess the admirer. All right. D. Your friend has helped you out of a bad situation. Write the note that you send thanking him or her, mentioning what he or she did. So you have to express gratitude first of all, and then you have to mention what was done. So gracias obviously is how you express gratitude. Gracias por arreglar mi coche. Thanks for fixing my car. So the simple structure that you can use is gracias por and then the infinitive. And obviously that would be the action that was done, right? So that's the easiest structure you can use. Gracias por followed by the infinitive of the verb. You could also say estoy agradecido There are other ways to thank a person, but this is the easiest way. Mhm. Estoy agradecido porque tú arreglaste mi coche. So I'm grateful or I'm thankful because you fixed my car. But this is a simpler structure. E, you have to go abroad during the school term and will miss many classes. Write the text message your teacher sends to you, advising of 2 ways you can keep up with your studies. So I utilize the imperative form and I find students have difficulty with the imperative, especially the conjugations. So I would recommend there are other structures you can use, but let's just look at what I wrote first. Consigue las notas de tus compañeros y mira las grabaciones. Get the notes or obtain the notes from your classmates and watch the recordings because obviously you're away. Now, this is the imperative, but you can also use deber, the conditional form of deber followed by the infinitive because that's also a recommendation or a way of giving advice. So I could have said, deberías conseguir las notas de tus compañeros y mirar las grabaciones. Yeah, I could have said that as well because that's an easier structure. With the imperative, you must know how to conjugate the verb depending on the person to whom you're speaking. Okay? Mhm. F, your neighbor is ill and needs some medication. Write the note he or she gives your father to take to the pharmacist, describing his or her symptoms and requesting a specific medication. So you have to express how you have to mention your symptoms and you have to request a certain type of medication. So, tengo una tos, así que me gustaría un jarabe para la tos. So I have a cough, so I would like cough syrup. Yeah. So una tos, that's my symptom, a cough, and I'm requesting the specific medication, which is cough syrup. And as you know, to request in Spanish is quisiera or me gustaría. I would like. Right? G, you had an accident and are recuperating at the hospital. Write the text that your best friend sends you offering to do 2 things for you. Okay? So you have to mention 2 things that your friend will do for you. So we can use this near future or even the simple future. Voy a cortar el césped y alimentar a los perros. I'm going to mow the lawn or cut the grass and feed the dogs. Muy bien. Any 2 favors that your friend would do for you. H, on the morning of your interview for a summer job, you receive an email with a change in time and a reason for the change. Write the email, okay? So as you see, I would have opted to use usted. So you have to mention the change in time. The word for interview is entrevista. Su entrevista tendrá lugar a las 10 porque el jefe llega tarde. So the change, your interview will take place at 10 o'clock because the boss is running late or is late. Obviously, the interview was supposed to be at an earlier time. Could have been 8, could have been 9, who knows, right? But the point is the time has changed. And that's the reason there. Yeah? Porque el jefe llega tarde. Your community is having an event to celebrate a special occasion. Write the note that is placed on the community notice board inviting persons to the event, mentioning what is being celebrated. Okay, so you have to write a notice to inviting persons to a celebration. I mean, yes, to a celebration, and you have to talk about it. So, todos están invitados a la fiesta para celebrar la victoria de nuestro país en la Copa del Mundo. So, everyone is invited to the party to celebrate our country's victory in the World Cup, or at the World Cup. Yeah. So, yeah. So, we have the invitation mentioning the event and then what is being celebrated. So we're celebrating our country's victory at the World Cup. And Jay, during a health crisis in your country, the Ministry of Health puts out a notice in the newspaper reminding the public of 2 precautions they should take. Write the 2 reminders that are given. Does this remind you of something? That's right, COVID. So two reminders. And once again, I utilize the imperative. Lávense las manos y lleven una mascarilla. Mascarilla, right. So that's the word for mask in Spanish. Now, of course, there are other precautions that you could have written, but once again, if you're not comfortable with the imperative form, you can utilize the conditional form of deber, right? So you could have said debería, well, you're talking to the public, so you should make it plural, ustedes. Deberían lavarse las manos y llevar una mascarilla. So you should wash your hands and wear a mask. So that's the same thing, just using a different structure. Okay? Muy bien. So those are the situations. Now let's move on to the letter. What scenario do we have? You have just returned from spending a week at the house of your Spanish-speaking friend. You forgot an important item at the house. Write a letter to your friend in which you include 1. Details about your experience at his or her house. 2. A full description of the item you forgot, highlighting its value to you. 3. A suggestion of how and when your friend can return the item. And 4. The expression of desire to visit soon. So those are the 4 details that you need to have in your letter, okay? So as usual, we start by writing the date in the right-hand corner. So, miércoles 15 de abril de 2026. And of course, we have our salutation, hola Enrique, or we could have said, querido Enrique. As customary, we greet the person and inquire about their well-being. Okay? ¿Cómo te va? How are you? Espero que todo esté bien. I hope that everything is good, that all is well, basically. And then we introduce the purpose of the letter. So we are talking about an item that we left at our friend's house. Te escribo para contarte sobre el reloj que dejé en tu casa. So I'm writing you to tell you about the watch that I left at your house. All right. Antes de nada, first of all, lo pasé bien en tu casa. I had a good time at your house. Disfruté de la piscina y los juegos en el patio. I enjoyed the pool and the games in the patio. So that responds to the first cue, which was details about your experience at his or her house. Now we proceed to the second cue, which is going to be a full description of the item that I forgot, right? Along with its value. Por desgracia, which means unfortunately. Olvidé mi reloj en tu casa. Olvidé means I forgot my watch at your house. Olvidar, olvidé from the verb olvidar, to forget. Es negro con una estrella en la parte de atrás. It is black with a star at the back. So that's a full description of the item. Now I have to talk about its value or its importance to me. Creo que lo dejé en tu baño. So I think that I left it in your bathroom. Este reloj es muy importante para mí porque mi abuela me lo compró porque saqué buenas notas en mis exámenes. So here I have highlighted the importance of this item. I said that this watch is very important to me because my grandmother bought it for me because I obtained good grades in my exams. So that highlights why the item is important. So now the next part I need to address is going to be a suggestion of how and when your friend can return the item. Because remember, this person is in a Spanish-speaking country and I am back home, wherever I am from, right? So that is, yeah. Hold on. Yeah, okay, good, yes, yes. Just making sure I was not misinterpreting something. But yeah, so this is now how I'm going to suggest how the item can be returned. Mi primo estará viajando a México la semana próxima, así que puedes darle el reloj. My cousin will be traveling to Mexico next week, so you can give him the watch. Le daré tu dirección. I will give him your address. Right? So obviously now that is the third cue, how it can be returned and when. So your friend is going to Mexico next week. Your cousin is traveling to Mexico next week, so he can stop by your house and collect the watch for you. But start at the house of your friend so he can collect the watch for you. So that describes how and when the item can be returned, okay? Now we go into the expression of desire to visit soon. So this is our final paragraph. Te echo de menos, así que voy a visitarte el año próximo durante mis vacaciones. I actually forgot the tilde on this, but you know, I'll just write an asterisk and indicate that the N should have it should be año, not ano, but yeah, that's life. So, te echo de menos, así que voy a visitarte el año próximo durante mis vacaciones. So, I miss you, so I'm going to visit you next year during my vacation. Sé que vamos a volver a pasarlo bien. I know that we're going to have a good time again. So, volver a, followed by the infinitive, means to do something again, right? So, it expresses repetition. Ya estoy emocionado. I'm already excited. Cuídate y adiós por ahora. Take care of yourself or take care and goodbye for now. Un abrazo. A hug. Jorge, which would be, and Jorge is the person that I am representing, of course. All right. Muy bien. And my word count was 134. Okay, good. So we proceed to section 3. The contextual dialogue. So in the blank spaces provided, complete the dialogue between yourself and a well-known cricketer. Give your responses in Spanish using between 80 and 100 words. You have got a chance to interview a well-known cricketer. Write the dialogue between the two of you, giving his or her responses. So here are the cues. 1, how he or she started his or her career. 2, the advantages and disadvantages of his or her career. 3, some upcoming events he or she is involved in. 4, opportunities he or she has for leisure activities while abroad. 5, an invitation to visit your school soon. All right. So these are the cues to help you follow the dialogue. Okay. All right. So 2, this is obviously what I would say. ¿Me puede decir cómo comenzó su carrera como jugador de cricket? So this is what so we are given the responses of the player, whoever the cricket player is. So the question is, can you tell me how you began your career as a cricket player or as a cricketer? So in order to know what the player says, I need to see what I say afterwards. So fantastic. I'm sorry, fantástico. Y me imagino que usted ha viajado a muchos países durante su carrera. Fantastic, wonderful. And I imagine that you have traveled to many countries during your career. So that doesn't really tell you exactly how he started. So in that case, you can just mention how you became a professional cricket player. So I said, empecé a jugar a la edad de 12 años y cuando tenía 16 años me convertí en jugador profesional. I started playing at the age of 12, and when I was 16 years old, I became a professional player. Mhm. So you just had to mention how you started. And in fact, that was the first cue. Yeah. So how you started your career. All right. So let's continue. So we follow on from the second comment. After he says the interviewer, I'm the interviewer. So after I say, me imagino que usted ha viajado a muchos países durante su carrera. So I imagine that you have traveled to many countries during your career. So to know what the player says, I have to skip to see what I say afterwards. Tantos países, so many countries. Y aparte de viajar por todas partes del mundo, ¿qué más le gusta de su carrera? So it's obvious that this player has to mention the countries that he has traveled to. That's obvious based on the response here. So you have to mention the countries so the player has to mention the countries that he has been to. So I said, por supuesto, he viajado a España, Inglaterra, Alemania y China. Yeah, so those are 4 countries. All right. So following on, after I said, well, so many countries, and apart from traveling throughout the world, what do you like? What more do you like about your career? Okay. So let's see what I say afterwards to know what I'm supposed to say here. So I say, suena muy emocionante, pero también habrá desventajas, ¿verdad? It sounds very exciting, but there are also disadvantages or downsides, right? So there you have to mention what he likes more about his career. Besides traveling, what more does he like? So any other plus you could mention. So I said, tengo la oportunidad de conocer a personas famosas. So I have the opportunity to meet famous people. So with that, you have a little leeway with that, right? You just have to mention something else that he likes about his career, because obviously apart from traveling, all right? Now, continuing, suena muy emocionante, pero también habla desventajas, ¿verdad? As I said, it sounds very exciting, but there will be downsides. Also, it sounds exciting, but there will also be downsides, right? So to know what I am to say here, I must skip to see what was said afterwards. Me imagino que echa de menos a su familia si pasa tanto tiempo lejos de ellos. So I imagine that you miss your family if you spend so much time away from them or far from them, right? Yeah. So obviously, the response here has to be that the disadvantage has to be that you don't get to spend a lot of time with family. That is the disadvantage. So I said, no paso mucho tiempo con mi familia. However you express that idea is fine, but you have to mention the disadvantage, that the disadvantage is that he does not have time for his family, or he does not spend time with his family, because that was the next that was my response after he speaks, right? So continuing, um, I suppose I imagine that you miss your family if you spend so much time away from them. So we skipped again to see what I said to find out what the player will have to say. Gracias a Dios por WhatsApp y FaceTime. Dígame, ¿qué partidos tiene el equipo en el futuro? So thank God for WhatsApp and FaceTime. Tell me, what matches does the team have in the future? Or which matches do they have? No, what matches? Yeah, what matches? Obviously, after after I made the comment about him missing his family, since he spends so much time away from them, this player would have to say that he stays in contact with them through WhatsApp and FaceTime, because my response afterwards was, thank God for WhatsApp and FaceTime. So they really tell you what you're supposed to say. You just have to understand and follow the conversation. See, los echo de menos. When I say by los, I mean them, like my family members. Los echo de menos, pero nos mantenemos en contacto por WhatsApp y FaceTime. So mantenerse en contacto would be to stay in touch. Yes, I miss them, but we keep in touch via WhatsApp and FaceTime. Continuing, uh, so thank God for WhatsApp and FaceTime. Tell me, what matches does the team have in the future? To know what he is to say, I have to look and see what I say afterwards. India y Australia. Qué emocionante, ¿verdad? So India and Australia, obviously those are the two matches he has. ¿Por cuánto tiempo va a estar en esos países? So the last question indicates what I'm supposed to say. So he asks, how long will you be, or how long are you going to be in those countries for? Yeah? So I have to obviously mention that we have matches against Australia and India, and I have to mention that that I'll be visiting those countries. I may not necessarily have to mention that I'll be visiting the countries, because I mean, yes, you should, because only just because I have games against these teams does not necessarily mean that I am traveling to their country. It could be on a neutral ground. So it's still important that you say that you're going to the country, given that the interviewer asks, ¿por cuánto tiempo va a estar en esos países? How long are you going to be there? So I said, tenemos partidos contra India y Australia, así que visitaremos esos países. So we have games against India and Australia. So we will visit those countries. Continuing on. So he says, right. So after I ask how long will you be in those countries? What do I say afterward so that we know what the player says? Cuando está en esos países, tiene la oportunidad de hacer turismo. So you respond to the question there, obviously, when I ask how long are you going to be in the countries for? You just respond how long. So pasaremos una semana en cada país. So we will spend 1 week in each country. Because my next question was, when you're in these countries, do you have the opportunity to go sightseeing, hacer turismo? So what does the player have to say? Let's skip. Qué bueno que aunque usted no tiene mucho tiempo libre, puede visitar algunos sitios turísticos. So he's saying, well, I'm saying, how good is it that, even though you don't have much free time, you can visit tourist sites? Una pregunta final. ¿Puede usted visitar mi escuela para charlar un poquito con nuestro equipo de cricket? Can you, one final question, can you visit my school to talk a little bit about, or to talk a little bit with our cricket team, our cricket team? So the first part of this response is going to tell you what the player has to say. So obviously I have to talk about, in this case I'm talking with the player. I would have to talk about not having much free time, but I'm still going to visit some, tourist sites. They give you they tell you what you're supposed to say. You just need to follow it. So, sí, visitaremos algunos sitios turísticos, aunque no tenemos mucho tiempo libre. So, yes, we will visit some tourist sites, even though we do not have much free time. And then, of course, the last part says, ¿puede usted visitar mi escuela para charlar un poquito con nuestro equipo de cricket? So, can you visit my school to talk a bit to our cricket team? And we have to look and see what I say at the end. Qué pena, like what a pity. Pero lo que tiene que hacer es más importante. Gracias por la entrevista. But what you have to do is more important. Thanks for the interview. So obviously he has to say that he is busy. He has something going on and he's unable to make it. So the last response has to be, so he has to talk about not being able to make it and why. So I said, por desgracia, no. Por desgracia, I should have put a comma there. Por desgracia, no puedo porque estoy ocupado. Unfortunately, I cannot because I am busy. And my word count was 93. Good? Muy bien. All right, section 4, reading comprehension. So let's go. Facing your fear. Todos los días yo iba a la escuela asustado por Jaime y Pedro, dos muchachos que me golpeaban, me atormentaban porque no yo sabía defenderme. Después de recibir los golpes, yo regresaba a casa llorando. Mi abuela me decía que tenía que hablar con alguien de la escuela sobre la situación. Pero ella no entendía que denunciar a estos muchachos resultaría en más golpes. Un día decidí hablar con mi primo para que me ayudara. Tenía 15 años y había estado tomando lecciones de defensa personal desde los 6 años. Me dijo que estos chicos necesitaban una lección y él me enseñaría cómo defenderme. Un viernes yo tomé la decisión de resolver mis problemas. Este día, Jaime me empujó y Pedro empezó a insultarme. Me avancé hacia Jaime y le di una patada fuerte. Pedro me miró con ojos asustados mientras se inclinaba para ayudarle a Jaime. Les dije en una voz amenazante. Quizás sea pequeño, pero no soy débil. No se metan conmigo de nuevo. Este día fue el último día que me molestaron. Very inspirational story. This part about me atormentaban porque no ellos. I'm wondering if I copied this incorrectly and it should be porque yo no sabía defenderme, but I'll double check. But I think I probably copied this incorrectly, right? But anyways, let's continue. A, how did the narrator feel about going to school every day? So it says in the first line, iba a la escuela asustado por Jaime y Pedro. So asustado means afraid. So the narrator felt afraid to go to school every day. Why did the narrator feel the way he did about going to school? Once again, that was in the first line. Por Jaime y Pedro, dos muchachos que me golpeaban. Golpear is to like hit, or you could say beat. So he felt that way because he was beaten by two boys by the names of Jaime and Pedro. I'm not translating the names. So yeah, so that's the reason that he felt afraid to go to school. What was the grandmother's advice to the narrator? So the grandmother said, mi abuela me decía que tenía que hablar con alguien de la escuela sobre la situación. So the grandmother advised him to speak to someone at the school about the situation. By someone, most likely she's referring to an administrative, a teacher or maybe someone in admin, right? That was the advice. So the grandmother advised him to talk to someone at school about the situation. B, why was the narrator reluctant to follow his grandmother's advice? So it says, pero ella no entendía que denunciar a estos muchachos resultaría en más golpes. Denunciar means to report. So she's saying that, so he's saying that she did not understand that reporting these boys would result in more beatings. So that's the reason he was reluctant to follow her advice. He was reluctant because reporting the boys would result in more beatings. Yeah. E, what decision did the narrator make and why? So he says, he said, un día decidí hablar con mi primo para que me ayudara. One day I decided to speak to my cousin to, one day I decided to speak to my cousin so that he would help me. So that was what he did. He went to his cousin for help. But why? Because tenía 15 años, so that wouldn't really be why he went. The second piece of information is why. Y había estado tomando lecciones de defensa personal desde los 6 años. So, so he's saying that he had been taking, so he went to his cousin for help because he had been taking self-defense classes. Oh, I said for 6 years. I just realized that that's a mistake. Not for 6 years. I should have said if it were for 6 years, it would be desde hace 6 años. But since it said desde 6 años, it means from the time he was 6. So I have to change that. So that part about E, so he decided to ask his cousin for help because his cousin had been taking self-defense classes since he was 6 years old. So I have to change that. Not for 6 years, since he was 6. So yeah, I will make the correction in the thing. So desde los 6 años means from the time he was 6, not for 6 years. All right, cool. F, how would the narrator's cousin help him? So that was said afterwards. Él me enseñaría cómo defenderme. So he would teach me how to defend myself. So that's how the narrator's cousin would help him. All right. G, what decision did the narrator make on that Friday? So, un viernes yo tomé la decisión de resolver mis problemas. So on Friday, I made a decision to resolve my problems. In other words, I took matters into my own hands. So on that Friday, the narrator decided to take matters into his own hands. Yep. H, what did the boys do to the narrator on that Friday? So este día, this day, Jaime me empujó y Pedro empezó a insultarme. So Jaime pushed him and Pedro began to insult him. So those were the two things that were done. On that Friday, Jaime pushed him and Pedro began to insult him. What action did the narrator take? So it says, me avancé hacia Jaime y le di una patada fuerte. So I advanced towards Jaime, or I went up to Jaime, and I gave him a strong kick, right? So that is what the narrator did. So he went up to Jaime and gave him a hard kick. Mhm. So explain the narrator's last words. So what did the narrator say? Les dije en una voz amenazante. So I told them in a threatening voice. Quizás sea pequeño, pero no soy débil. I may be small, but I'm not weak. No se metan conmigo de nuevo. Do not mess with me again. And then it ends by saying that was ese día fue el último día que me molestaron. So this day was the last day that they bothered him. So they asked you to explain the narrator's last words. So you're not supposed to write and translate what he said. You're supposed to explain what he's saying, right? So I said the narrator's last words showed that he was no longer afraid as he had developed the courage to stand up to the bullies because obviously he said, I may be weak, I may be small, but I'm not weak. But these words also reinforce the notion that one should not be judged based on one's appearance because he says, I may be small, but I'm not weak, right? So those were very telling. Those words were very telling. So he finally got the courage to stand up to the bullies, and it reinforces the idea that one should not be judged based on one's size. All right. So that brings us to the end of this paper. Espero que ustedes hayan disfrutado de este video y que los hayan ayudado, los haya eh, eh, oh, let me go. Voy a repetir. I lost my train of thought. Espero que ustedes hayan disfrutado de este video y que este video los haya ayudado mucho. Gracias por ver y nos vemos.